Quick intro then. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. This is RGU Startup Accelerator extra session. So I appreciate it wasn't on the schedule, but we're delighted that Maria has taken the time out of her busy schedule back and forth to the islands to deliver this online learning session for yourselves, specifically dedicated to digital products. I know some of you are asking about what other support there is here. So I'm hoping that everyone that's made those requests will be here today. And of course, we will be recording and sharing today's recording as usual. And now I'm just going to hand over everything to Maria. So if you have any questions and things, please direct everything at Maria. I'll just be recording. Thank you very much. Thanks, Maria.
That's great, thank you. Yes, hi everyone. So my name's Maria. Give a quick bit of background about me. I've got two companies based in Shetland. The first is a software development company called Mesomorphic, and we specialize in delivering bespoke software to small and medium-sized rural businesses. And the second company that I have is called Silicon Croft, and it came out of Mesomorphic as originally part of our corporate social responsibility project, but I've now turned that into a business. And what Silicon Croft is all about, it's about supporting rural educators to learn digital skills that will encourage them to bring more of these opportunities into the classroom. And we focus on things such as Scratch, microbits, and other various tools that we have within the industry to start children to become more confident in adopting some coding methodology, some of the approaches, and we'll talk about that a little bit today, actually. But also just really, as I say, focusing on increasing that confidence to be able to bring more opportunities for learning into their classroom. So I've been asked to come along today to deliver a session on developing a digital product or service. And what we're going to be looking at today, we have got quite a bit to get through, but I don't want you to worry about it too much because there's going to be some sections that are going to be longer than others. And what we're going to be going through are some of the initial phases that you need to think about when you are designing your digital service or your product. So first we're looking at that ideation and the idea tree. Now I know a lot of you already have some ideas or you've got ideas that you've been working on for a while, and that's great. This bit may not be as relevant to you, but there'll still be something very interesting to take away from this, as an idea tree is a really helpful tool for breaking your ideas down and into different elements and then mapping it against your time, your other resources, and your financial resources as well. So it could help you pick and choose the best way to deliver your MVP and then moving on. Will we then be looking at different elements within your digital products or services? Sorry, I can speak, which is looking at your user flow, your data integrations. We're going to touch a little bit on agile methodology, which I realize is something that's commonly associated with software development, but actually the principles of agile methodology is really helpful as an entrepreneur. Because it will help you to break down your gigantic idea into small bite-sized pieces, and it will help you to plan your products easier. We're going to touch briefly on wireframes, and then looking also at different ways you can get something coded, whether that be bespoke or through a low code, no code. And finally, we're going to be looking at testing. I am going to be sharing my contact details with you all at the end of this session as well. And you're always welcome to email me. Due to the number of things I do spin, I don't always respond to emails straight away. So the general rule I work with is that I will respond to you within 2 days. And if you haven't heard from me within the space of the week, you're then free to nag me. So yeah, let's get started. So this idea tree, now this might be something that you've seen before. And what the idea tree is, it's about taking your grand idea, breaking it down into elements or the core elements, and then you can think about how you can deliver the core pieces of these elements to make up your MVP. Now, to make that feel a little bit more, how to put it into action, I've created an idea lamp for a tree. No, idea tree for a lamp. Goodness me. So I'm going to state now that I am not an engineer and I am definitely not a lamp maker, but a lamp is one of the best ideas I can think about when thinking about your idea tree. And you'll see that I've taken this process of having the elements and I've broken it down into the 4 key elements of what makes up a lamp. I've got the body material, I've got the lampshade material, I've got the power source, and I've got the switch type. So underneath each of these elements, I've got different ways that I can deliver this element. So looking at the body material to start off with, I can make it out of wood, make it out of metal, plastic, or glass. And I've done the same process with the shade, the power source, and the switch type. And then what I've done is I've reviewed all these different elements, and I've selected the things that I can easily deliver with that falls within my current knowledge base, that falls within the timeline that I can deliver, and also what other resources that I have available to deliver this product or this MVP. Now, what we can do with this is apply the same principle to your digital product or service, and it is easy to use in both scenarios. So these are the types of elements that you can think about when creating an idea tree for your digital product or service. So an element could be, how is it actually going to be used? Is it going to be a website? Is it going to be an app? Is it a desktop piece of software or service? You need to think about, how is your data going to be displayed? There's different ways that we can do that. I've listed a couple of examples here, but underneath your how your data will be displayed element, you can have your dashboards, you can have downloads, and any other way you can think about how your data will be accessed. The way of collecting data is another element to think about, and that could be manual input, that can be through integration, that can be from potentially scraping other websites. There's lots of different ways that you can collect data. I need to list all these different ways that are available for you to use underneath that element. You need to think about the valuable parts of your product or your service. What is the key thing your clients or yourself or whoever is going to be using your product or service, how are they going to get the value from it? Is it going to be a report? Is it going to be a dashboard? Is it going to be an animation? And again, list that underneath that valuable value element. And finally, the value and the access are kind of similar, but again, it depends really on how your product is being developed. But I've listed it as a separate element here. And it's thinking about, how are your customers going to actually access that value? Are reports going to be in PDFs? Is it going to be a Word document? Is it a CSV? Are they going to be able to edit it, or is it going to be a fixed format? So what I want to do for the next couple of minutes is I want you to think about your product, and I want you to think about, how can you apply this idea tree into your product. I know we've got an hour today, and I don't want to rush us through, but I just want to take a couple of minutes just to sit and think about what it is that you are looking to build and how you can put that into that tree element. And I've just seen there's something in the chat, so I'm just going to have a quick look at that. But you can just have a think for the next couple of minutes about how that is to be used, or that idea tree is going to be used. And there's a question in from Ronnie, which is asking about a CSV. Now, a CSV is a type of file that you can download from a system, and you can import it into Excel, or you can keep it as a text file, but it's a different way of downloading data. And at this precise moment in time, I have embarrassingly forgot what CSV actually stands for. But what it basically is, at the end of the day, it's a different way of downloading data that can be manipulated in another system elsewhere. No problem.
I think it's something to do with commas, isn't it, Maria?
Yeah, I've got commas in my head, but I can't think what the rest is. And that's a little bit embarrassing, considering what I do every day.
All right. It's probably just one of those things you're so used to using it. You just, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've just spent a couple of minutes with yourself just reflecting on the use of the idea tree. And hopefully you've got to understand what I mean here about breaking your ideas down into those key elements. And you've been listing different ways you can deliver those elements. So as you're going through the design stage, I'm not 100% sure where you are at the moment on your entrepreneurial journey, but if you were right at the beginning, you will have lots of different lists of ideas. And even if you're in the middle of your journey or towards the end, you've also now going to have an idea tree that's got different ways for you to deliver the value of your product. Are there any questions about that part so far? No? Excellent. Okay. So we're going to move on to the next part. Now, when you started thinking about your products, you will have created a business plan. Now, a business plan in this context does not have to be a 25-page document. The idea, though, behind this business plan here is stating what you're developing, how you're going to develop it, thinking about who your competitors are and the different ways that you're going to market it. So you need to start thinking about bringing this idea to life. And a business plan is a really helpful tool for keeping an eye on those key elements. And when you start to think about moving your idea on to the next phase, having a business plan is going to be a key part. But I don't want to focus too much on having a completely detailed plan because these plans do change. But you need to capture all the key elements of your business inside your business plan. And as I've listed here, you need to know who your competitors are. Partly because you need to know how flooded the market is. Is there anybody else doing what it is that you're doing in the same space? But also knowing if anyone's doing something similar, because you can then start to use this as your research base. Now, I was told a while back that all the SaaS products that we need to develop have now been developed. Because I'm stubborn, I push back against that. I think there's always room for innovation, and I think there's always going to be space for new technology to be brought on board. However, I do acknowledge that there are a lot of digital products and services out there already. And if we can research people who have had similar ideas or are using similar layouts or similar processes that we're thinking about for our own products, this is actually quite a good thing for us to do because we can see what is out there. We can start to think about what your user journeys are going to be like using that particular product, and asking yourself, are there things that you like about it? Are there things you don't like about it? And it's at this point when we start to take that inspiration from other people, we need to start capturing this type of information into a shareable format. And the reason why I say capturing it in a shareable format, when I first started out building another business, I had everything all in my head. And my head was a wonderful place. It was very, very busy. But the problem is when I started to expand that one and then I was bringing other people along, I had no way of really sharing that information with them because it was all in my head or it was in my notebook, which was in my handbag, and they were nowhere near my handbag. So when you start to take that inspiration, and when we're going through the next steps of our processes, you need to remember that everything needs to be in a shareable format. It doesn't necessarily have to mean shareable Word documents or PDFs. Even if you're a bit like me and you like to scribble things down, take a photograph and upload it into a shared space, and it will save you a lot of time and hassle later on down the road as you start to build out your ideas and also bringing other expertise into your journey. But as I said, when we're looking at that, taking an inspiration, think about how you're feeling when you're using a similar product. Think about, are there any gaps that you can identify? And perhaps the gap that you can identify is the area that you are going to be filling. And perhaps when you are looking at other people's examples of what they've created, that will then possibly tie back into your idea tree and give you other inspiration of different ways to deliver the key elements of your service or your product. Once you've done your research and you've worked out what you like, what you don't like, identify any gaps, you then now need to start thinking about who is it that is going to be using your product. Now, when you've done your business plan, you're saying what you're creating and why. And when you start to identify your user roles, you will then start thinking about who is actually using it, why they are using it. And when you've got your user roles, that will tie in really, really nicely with your marketing plan as well. So when we think about user roles, we're thinking about anyone who's going to be using your system. And again, I know I just said it in the last slide, but you need to remember that anything from this point has to remain shareable. I'm a big fan of using post-it notes and stick drawings whenever I'm developing a new piece of software or service. My wall is filled with stick men and stick women, and I give them names and I think about, where they are, what are they trying to get from this, give them a bit of a background story as well, because that will all tie into that next stage. But for the purpose of today, thinking about the key user roles here, I've got my admin, I've got my actual client, there could be potential staff members or a consultant. And again, think about it, there will be other people that will be using system you might not necessarily have thought about before. And it's really important here to keep everything in an easily editable format. And the reason will come clear on the next slide. But what you'll need to be able to do is be able to move these different elements around on your screen or on your notepad or however you're going to have it. But also all your user roles need to be shared very clearly with the rest of the team. And when I say the rest of the team, even if it's just you, you are going to be wearing multiple different hats when it comes to developing your product or your service. So having it easily definable, easily shareable will help keep everything together and also ease that process. So you've got your user roles, and I say you need to think about what the roles are and how they're going to be using the actual system, but also what are their responsibilities within the product and service as well. So when we've got our user roles, we need to start thinking about our user flows. And for this purpose, I've chosen the client. So when we've got our client, when they first start to use our product and service, and in my head at this moment, I'm just designing an app. The client has to log in before they can do anything within the thing that I'm developing. And then from here, they've got two options. They're going to, if it's the first time that they've logged into this thing that I'm creating, I want them to agree to the terms and conditions. And then once they've agreed to the terms and conditions, they're going to go to a dashboard. Now, once they've used this app once, they don't have to keep agreeing to the T's and C's because they've done it once. So what is going to happen next time when the client logs in, it's just going to go straight to that dashboard. Once they're on the dashboard, they are going to be filtering data. I haven't specified yet what data they're going to filter, but all I know is at this point they're going to be filtering the data because I know that's the most valuable part of this product that I'm developing. They can then download a report because again, that having that piece of data or whatever they're using for this product service, that report is the most valuable part. So being able to filter the data is valuable for them as part of the interaction, but actually having that downloadable report is the key thing. And at the end, they log out. So that is the key user flow for my client. And that is what I have. And what I tend to do with user flows, I do have everything in post-it notes because generally I find that once I start to visualize how these people are going to be using the system, chances are I end up swapping steps around. So that's why I tend to use post-it notes. But again, having useful tools like Draw.io is a really good another good way of having more of a digital representation and then having it around, and even having a Trello board is a really useful way to capture the different individual steps. So this is our client, and I'm now going to add in the admin. And you can see already where I've got the admin, I've highlighted this in blue. The client originally in our first slide is just going to go straight to login and agree to terms and conditions or go straight to the dashboard. But actually the admin, the responsibility of the admin is to make sure that whoever comes to sign up to the product is actually the right type of client. So the admin user, they're going to be going through the same system, but the first step is that the client is going to actually now sign up with an email and the admin is going to get that notification. So we can already see that there's a new step in for the client. So we move the logins a bit further down and we focus now on that admin part. So the admin receives a notification. They can either accept or reject the account. That then goes back to the client who then activates the account and then they go to log in and they have that original user flow. And as you are adding in more and more user roles, you'll start to see that your user flow will become much more convoluted. And having this a clear visual way of separating out different user roles, but showing how they interact is going to be really, really helpful when you start to get to that build process. The next step to think about is your integrations and data flow. Now, you'll see on the left-hand side on this bit here, this is the original part of the user flow that we had on the last slide. But I'm now starting to add in integrations like MailChimp because I want to be able to, as part of my terms and conditions, the client who signs up to my service are going to receive marketing emails from me. They can opt out, but I need to be able to know that if they are opting in for the marketing emails, then their information is stored in MailChimp. So that is an integration I need to think about. I'm also thinking about how can I monetize my product, because at the moment they can just download it for free from the Google Store or the Apple Store. I know that the key part of the value of my product or service is actually getting that that report at the end. So they can filter the data and they can have a look at stuff. But I actually want them, before they download that report, I want them to be able to pay for it. So that's another integration, is having that stripe. So we've got two different types of integrations in here, but also you'll start to see that I've started to introduce some dashed lines here. And the reason why I've used a dashed line is because I am showing another step of the data flow. So when you're thinking about the user flow, it's what is a different step someone is someone actively doing to use your service. And the data flow, while this is a very simplistic example, the data flow is thinking, what am I collecting in my product or my service, and where else is it shared out? So the next part we're going to be looking at is agile methodology. Now, agile methodology is something that's often spoken about when we talk about software development, but actually agile methodology is something that's the principles of it is something that's really, really helpful for when we are planning products, new services, new products, sorry, or even going through and building up our businesses. And these are the key elements of the agile approach. You plan, you develop, you test, deploy, and then you have a retrospective. And this will come a bit clearer as we go through this next part. But the planning part is absolutely critical. And again, making sure that this is in a format that can easily be shared, but also when it comes to making plans, creating a plan is often one of the most exciting parts, but it also is one of the parts that we get a bit too focused on at times. If we get too focused on the plan, has to be the plan when we create it, we sometimes lose the reactivity that agile gives us. So when we're thinking about our plans, we're going to have the key elements that we're going to be focusing on, but you never know what unplanned surprises might come up or what new ideas you have. So when you're thinking about your plan, this is why we're breaking it down to smaller chunks, because then we can start thinking about how all these different elements hang in together. Once you've got your first part of your plan, you then go to develop it. Developing it can be writing the software, can be delivering a new piece of service. The development part is you actually building it. And that ties into your idea tree that we talked about earlier. But then we need to go look into testing it. We'll look at testing a bit later on. But when you're developing something and testing it, when you are testing it, you are wanting to see that your theories, your functionality, whatever it is that you are building actually works well enough for you to be able to give it to a client. And that is when you deploy. Once you've passed all the tests and you've fixed all the bugs, and bugs in software terms is, we'll just say something hasn't gone right. So if I'm thinking about the reports that I'm wanting to have downloaded from my app, and when I go to download it, the format is completely shot, or there's data that's missing, that test has failed. So I go back to develop that, because I cannot give that out to a client when the most valuable part of my product is not working properly. So if I test it and it fails, it goes back to being developed, pass the test, we deploy. And at the end of each phase of your plan, it's important to think about the retrospective. And retrospectives are the reflection part, and the critical thinking and the analytical part of your journey. So when you do your retrospective, you think about what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, what can you improve on next time, because chances are when you've gone through the develop and the test phase, you've learned a lot of lessons during that point. And then you want to think about things you want to improve for the next time round. So again, think about how you're going to build on those lessons learned. And then you go back to the top. You plan your next part of your product, or your next part of your service, or the next phase of your business build up. So you plan that bit, develop it, build it, test it, fails, passes, deploys, and it's a continuous cycle. And the best bit that I really like about agile methodology is that it reminds me that it gives you that flexibility. It helps to break down those large ideas into smaller elements. And the elements that we are creating are called user stories. And this user story is how I communicate what I need to the development team. Given that we have bespoke software, we have more of the in-house conversation between myself and the development team. I'm not necessarily sitting there with my technical hat on, I'm sitting there with my client hat on, and I tell them what I need for them to build in order for me to sell the service. So a user story is set up into 3 sections. We've got the who, the what, and the why. And these three things are all very, very important. But out of all these three, the who and the why are the most critical. The what, it can sometimes be a bit more flexible. Oh, sorry, I've just seen that Ronnie's just Googled what CSV means. Thanks, Ronnie. So yeah, sorry. So we've got the who, what, and the why. The who and the why are the most important, because when we're thinking about our user roles, do you want to have, if you've got even just say your client and you've got your admin's going to have access to everything. Your client is not going to have access to everything because you don't want them to be able to access all the inner workings of your system. And as a developer, they need to know which user type, what it is that you think they need to do, and why they need to do it. So I'm just going to go through an example of how you build up a user story. So remember when we did our user types, we've got the as an admin user, and I had an admin user in my diagram. I want them to be able to accept or reject a new account sign up, because remember the responsibility of my admin is that they have that authority to accept or reject account signups, and then at that point, the client gets that that link to access the product. And the why is so that I can monitor who is using my system. So the full user story is as an admin user, I accept or reject a new account sign up so that I can monitor who is using my system. Does that make sense so far? Yep, lots of nodding faces. Sorry, I've moved my cameras over here, so great. Okay. So once you've got your user stories, this is when you have to start grouping your user stories together to go create your plan. If I just go back up to here. So your user stories are what makes up your plan. And a lesson that I learnt very early on is that you can't forget to create user stories for yourself as founders, especially when you go into that building up of the business. So you've got the roles within your products or your services, but also you've got founder specific stories as well. So for example, as a founder, I can process the payments through whatever account software that I'm using, so I know that I can pay my bills. It's little things like that, and that was one thing that I learned a bit too late to start off with, but like I say, it was a very valuable lesson that I learned. So when you're thinking about your plans, you need to make sure that it's not just the clients and the actual product and thing you're developing. It's also about the different roles of around the company that are impacted by what it is that you are developing. So this is what I mean. So when we talk about sprints, a sprint is a chunk of a plan. And the way that I like to visualize sprints is I use a Trello board. And a Trello board I quite like because it's got a post-it note appeal, but it's digital. You might have picked up now that I like using post-it notes. But also it gives you the ability to move things around and helps you to clearly identify different columns for different sprints. Now, when you are creating your sprints that are built up on your user stories or your to-do lists, I still prefer them to use them as user stories, but sometimes you do get a to-do task inside a sprint. Having these laid out clearly will help you identify whether you've got one sprint that may be overloaded or one sprint that is underloaded. Now, it might be that the sprint that's smaller might be more complex. If it is quite a complex sprint, when you see the complexity of that sprint, you will recognize that it might actually take you a little bit longer time than what you realize. So when you are going through this process, you'll be able to identify, or you will learn about how achievable your sprint planning is, and it helps take off that pressure. And when you're going through the sprints, I approach these as a to do, in progress, and done approach. And it's a good visual tool for me because I am quite a visual person, of seeing how the progress is going, as I'm going through this particular sprint. And it also helps take off that pressure, but also helps to communicate as well. Now, wireframes is the visual part of your product, and it's talking about the functional elements. So whether it be a website or an app or whatever it is that you are developing, the wireframes are incredibly important. it is really important to understand that user flow and the data flow, and all that will tie into how your product or your service will look on screen. Now, I've given a very basic overview here, and I hope the slide is clear enough to be able to see that. If not, I am able to share these slides out after. But you can see here, this is just a name for a blog. And what I've got here is just a very black and white, this is what I want, this is the element I want here, and this is what is going to be displayed on there. And we can see that I know that across the top of the blog, I've got the different topics. I want the article that I want to read being displayed on the main part of the screen, but I can also see what other latest posts have been made available. Your product that you are developing, it's very important that you highlight any particular buttons that need to be pressed, or any areas you got drop down menus. I was really hoping to make a little video to put into the slide, but I unfortunately didn't wasn't able to create one. But what I've got here, and what I would do to build this out, is to create arrows to say that a user has to click onto here, or a user will have to click onto here, for example, if there was a login option. The RSS feed, where does that come from? And so all the work that we've done through the last couple of phases, I think about who's using it, what and why, that then all ties into your wireframe at the front here. So I think I just heard someone try and comment something there, or did I mishear that? No, that's fine. So yeah, so your wireframe is what is the person going to be seeing and how are they going to use it. The way that something looks is called the user interface. The way that someone's going to use it is called the user experience. And those are the two key things you need to think about in order to deliver your service or your product. Now, given that these are digital products or services, I just want to quickly just touch on the different types of coding approaches that you can have. We've got the low code, no code approach, or you've got the bespoke approach like we use in Mesomorphic. Each have their own pluses and minuses. With the low code, no code, these are third-party apps that have been created, and some of them are free, some of them are paid services. Obviously, when you pay for a service, you get more functionality, and that is how they create their money. And the product that you are designing is often hosted through that third party. The benefit here is more often than not, there's with a click and drag approach to development, and it'll help you quickly build up your changing your wireframes into a screen for you to be able to work through. But also there's less physical coding for you to do. So if you're not a technical person, then the low code, no code is a really good way of you being able to build an initial prototype to then maybe look at moving on to a bespoke product towards the end. But like I say, I don't want to go into details too much at the moment, but we can always talk about that if you've got time at the end. The low code, no code is cheaper. I wish I could be competitive with the low code, no code approach, but I cannot charge charge £25 a month for a product that is going to be bespoke. So it is cheaper. And as I mentioned, it is generally quicker to develop your MVP. And it gives you the one good thing about low code, no code, it does have a core set of functionalities. So you've got the drop down menus, you've got your filters, you've got your downloads, you've got the ability to build certain I think I've seen something that's got the PDF downloads and things with that. So if you've got your core functionality, you can use the low code, no code, and there are lots of different training opportunities out there as well for you to be able to use these platforms. When you're going down the bespoke route, the best bit about bespoke is you own your IP straight off the bat. And by owning your IP, that gives you control of your product, it gives you value to your business, but also it gives you that first tangible thing for you to hold on to. And for me, that's quite an exciting bit because you can then go into trading, trademarking, and again, start to build up that value and building up that brand. The downside of bespoke is you will have to write your own code. Now, if you're a technical person, great, you can crack on. But also, if you're not a technical person, this is where working with companies like Mesomorphic, for example, is quite a useful tool for you to have. And if you were to hand over some of our developers with all the lists of user stories that you've created, you will have gold stars straight away, because those user stories are a clear way to communicate with the developers what it is you want to build, who's it for, and why they're doing it. The downside of bespoke is that it is more expensive, and we do have people that will bootstrap their initial development. And when we're thinking about a product that we want to design using bespoke software, the core the MVP that you have in your mind might end up being reduced a little bit more to then make sure you've got that functionality in straight away, and you can start to use it straight away to get your users actually using the product. So the MVP that you've got in your mind might change slightly depending on what your financial situation is. But generally, however, the cost for bespoke software is going to be significantly higher than that low code, no code. And that's not a bad thing. It gives you that complete range of functionality that you want to design in the way that you feel like it needs to be designed and delivered to your clients. But as I say, there is a financial implication to that. Also, with the bespoke software, given that we are creating, oh, sorry, Shiva, the MVP is a minimum viable product. So what is the core thing you're going to be delivering? Does that make sense? Cool. Okay. With the bespoke software as well, there is a longer time frame. Bespoke software is not about click and drag, and we do generally have to create the code line by line from scratch. We do use pre-existing code, we use pre-existing libraries, but still there's a lot of manual work when it comes to developing a bespoke product, which is why it does take a longer time. But the benefit of that, however, is because you are building everything from scratch, as I say, it gives you that opportunity to deliver more complex and more intricate functionality that may not be available in low code, no code. The way that I'm seeing the market move at the moment is that a lot of the clients I've been working with want everything developed in low code, no code to start off with, because they want to test that their ideas work, and then they can start testing it out on their client base pretty quickly. And then they move into that bespoke area or that bespoke development once they know that their ideas work. But I've also had clients who just jump in straight away with that bespoke piece because they know that what they are building and what they want to have developed is much more intricate than what a low code, no code approach can use. So there's pluses and minuses for both. And finally, just the last bit we're going to be talking about is actually testing your products or your services. I was having a really interesting conversation yesterday with a couple of students, and we were talking about the different types of user groups that you can use. Now, there's two different types of, well, I say two, there'll be more than two, but generally the two that I tend to work with is a contained user group, and then you've got the ones who are early adopters. Now, the contained user group will be created by, let's just say, 50 people that you know. Only 50 people will have access to the product or service that you're using, and that is the limit to your group. It doesn't have to be 50, but that's just the arbitrary number. But it's a fixed number of users that you have as part of your initial testing methods for your product. The early adopters, however, is a slightly different approach, and there are different ways of being able to build up your early adopter users. Generally, you find that you rely more on marketing and promotion. But these early adopters are often or not end up being advocates for your products. And I don't know if you've ever seen the YouTube video of the dancer in the field, where you start off with one single dance and you're throwing a proper rave, and eventually starts to get more and more people following him and surrounding him. You end up having a whole field full of dancing ravers. It's pretty much what early adopters are all about, and it's absolutely incredible. And as I say, there's pros and cons for using both approaches. Generally, what I find is using that contained user group gives you a fixed number of users to use your product with, and it helps you test the scalability of your service or your product. But again, it depends really what it is you want to look for. As you're going through the testing of your user groups, we often find that we have something called A/B testing, and it's a bit like you split your user group up into two. So one part of the group can be using a particular or one approach to using your service, and the other half of the group can be using an alternative approach using your services, and you can compare and contrast the outcomes, see which method works best. Perhaps, is I don't know, downloading from the website and having the sign up process in a certain way works better for one group than the other. And if you can find that there's some very clear evidence that actually this process worked better, you can then go back and revisit your user flow to then readjust it and then improve your product or your service as you go along. It's really important to capture and actually use any qualitative or quantitative data that you can capture throughout your testing. So regardless of whether you're using it at early adopters or your contained user groups, try it many different ways as possible to get feedback. And the feedback can be ratings, stars, thumbs ups, thumbs down, short sentences, longer sentences. There's different analytical approaches you can use to change a qualitative feedback into a more data representation. And using this data is going to help you to really improve and identify trends and potential opportunities for further development within your product or your service. And if you are someone who is from a more technical background and you're wanting to develop and design your own products, when you're thinking about not just how the users are finding your products or your services and getting that first part of that qualitative and quantitative capture, you need to think about what tests you're putting in for when you're actually developing the code as well. So you've got your unit tests, which are a critical part for any software developer. And you're writing a unit test to see how many different ways there are to break your code. You've got that behavioral driven development testing approach. You've got your manual testing and you've got automated testing as well. And I don't want to use this time today because I realize we're at 1:45 now to talk too much into different details about that. But yeah, I'm always happy to have a chat with folk if they want to. So we've covered quite a lot, and I just want to use the last few minutes just to open the floor up really for any questions. But what I want to do as well is just to share my email, and you're always welcome to email me with any questions. But also, I do believe as part of the accelerator, there is a process for requesting any mentorship or anything like that. So I don't want to rock that boat. But if you do want to have a chat, you can always email me or go through the Innovation School and they will get in touch with me as well. So that's everything from me, and I will stop sharing just now.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Maria. That's great.
No
That
problem.
was a really interesting session. Thank you so much for taking the time. Like I say, Maria Bell has been a big supporter of the Accelerator for many years, and it's great seeing the work you're doing with Mesomorphic as well.
Thank you.
And still going strong, the business as well. So it's really great to get that insight in terms of your sort of technical know-how, specifically with regards to digital products. So Shiva, Ronnie, and Wenfang, I'm sure you remember, Maria from the session we did with the Ecosystem Day. So you'll know she's really friendly. So please do, like I say, if you need to follow up with her for anything, please do feel free. She's happy to share her contact details, so that's fine. But does anybody have any questions? Just to open the floor, maybe Dawn as well. If you want to have a quick chat before we wrap up today's lunchtime session.
I just wanted to say, Maria, do you think, would you recommend for somebody who's just starting out to use the sort of no code, low code as their first iteration with a view to then giving that to you do you feel that would enhance the brief, or does that just not add any value?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think it depends on what it is you're developing. If you're developing a software system and let's just say you're developing an app. You can develop something in low code, no code if you feel comfortable to do that. And then you can hand it over to us, for example, and say, this is what I want, but in a bespoke software environment. That is one way to do it. However, if you're going to be building something in low code, no code with the with the knowledge that you're going to go straight into bespoke, chances are that it might just be easier to speak with us first, or a bespoke company first, to get their thoughts and input on it. And I would probably be more inclined to rest more. If it was me, I would focus on creating the wireframes and the user flows and the data flows, then speaking with companies, and then after that sort of exploration, if you find that actually making something in low code, no code is the better option, I would then go that way. So do the big parts, which is that first part of the user flow and journey, speak with people who are more technically minded and say, right, what would you think this is? And they might say, yeah, go down the low code, no code, and then yeah, by all means, go for it. There is nothing wrong with low code, no code. There are some very very useful and very powerful tools out there, but with the bespoke, there are the advantages that you own your IP straight from the bat. So there's a lot of factors play into it. So I don't know if I've answered the question fully. I would need to know more about what it is you're developing or building.
Yeah, so my role is in mentoring and advising, and you know, in the past I've always said, go and speak to somebody who knows what they're doing, and they'll tell you whether there is already software in existence that can help you with that initial stage.
Yeah.
So I think I'm probably along the right lines. What I was missing from my knowledge was that bit that you introduced at the beginning of just exactly who are you speaking to and for what reason. And it's funny because my background's in marketing, and I would do that if I was, you know, creating an advertisement for somebody. I've never thought of applying it to a digital product before. So in some ways it was quite reassuring to see that the underlying theory was the same.
Oh, absolutely. It was I had a brilliant light bulb moment a few years back now when I was creating all these different user roles, and I was thinking about it from a marketing point of view as well. It's like, oh, I've already done half my work here. I just now need to know where I can find them. I know the questions that they'll be asking because you can trace that back through the user flow. So you've done a quite large chunk of work. So it does help, as you say. There's a lot of overlap, which
Yeah.
that was a good light bulb moment.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, great. Anybody else have any other suggestions, comments, notes, questions, discussion points?
Oh, Shiva.
Yep, go for it.
Yeah, hi everybody. I don't know. Can you hear me? My
I can hear you
background is really, really noisy.
It's a little bit wonky, but yes, we can just about make you out. Yeah.
That's the bad. Yeah. I just wanted to thank you, Maria. You gave me a kind of another approach. So I've got my website, which is with I think that it's with no code and no. Yeah, and that was with GoDaddy's. And I guess there's just cards from Google or from GoDaddy.
Sorry, Shiva, I'm just going to interrupt. We're really struggling to hear you, actually. Could you possibly type your question or your comment? Just because it's very echoey. Yeah.
Right, okay, no worries.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything they want to add, or got 10 minutes to go?
I'm still chuckling about the fact that I forgot what CSV meant. That's going to haunt me.
I'm sure it happens to the best of us, absolutely. Well, I suppose you probably will be seeing some of this yourself, Maria, just to make a wee comment. Obviously, developments of AI. Are you seeing more of this coming in, creeping into your work potentially?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things we can talk about for AI. The bit that I've seen that I find really interesting is that when low code, no code first kicked off, we were seeing a lot of products that came out. If you looked under the hoods, it was an absolute mishmash. When you're doing bespoke software, you can create the most efficient code. And when you have efficient code, it is it's less energy consuming, and it's not as overly complex, or when you start to smoosh things together, it's not very efficient. And when I'm seeing some of the code that's being developed through AI, some of it's really good. Some of it is absolute chaos. And one of the experiments I love to do with the kids that I work with through Silicon Croft is I get them to put in the same coding prompts into whatever they're developing, into whatever AI they want to be using. And I often get them to ask for the prompt of creating a snake game, like you used to have on the old Nokias. Absolutely brilliant game. But the 3 games that come back, we did this at school recently, there's 3 groups and all the games came back differently. So that was quite interesting for me. So there's no consistency in that respect. But then at the same time, there is a lot of useful stuff that's coming out of AI, and I use it for me for when it comes to, as you can probably guess, I can waffle. I'm not always most concise. So if I write a bunch of bullet notes or bullet points, I get it to create documentation for me, as long as I've put everything in that I need. I never ask it to write anything for me, because down that way, no, there's danger down that way. But I'm seeing similar things when it comes to using AI for developing code. If you tell it exactly what it is that you want, it will create that thing. But again, it's open to interpretation at times. So I'm delighted that there are more opportunities for people to use it, but I still say use it with a pinch of salt.
Sure, absolutely.
But then in saying that, I've used it when I've had brain farts when it comes to Excel formulas, and instead of I can sit with an Excel spreadsheet and actually forget what I'm looking to do. So I just quickly jump onto ChatGPT and say, how do I do this?
Yeah.
And then I work backwards from there. Because again, it can sometimes give you quite an overcomplicated formula, and I can just trim it back. But yeah, that's what I've seen.
Be a useful tool, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Shiva's got her question in the chat now. So she's saying, she was saying that with GoDaddy, I get stats about who visits my website. So this is Shiva's website for her business. But I would like to see who visited my site, I think, and the form that I can use is to actually make it with a format that the visitor can sign up. So I think she's saying with GoDaddy, she gets some analytics through in terms of who's actually visiting the website. But she would like a form as well to go along with that. Is there a way that you'd advise maybe Shiva to do that? Shiva, is that kind of what you're asking? Okay, great.
Okay, so I haven't used GoDaddy that much, but what they will have, it's a bit like Wix as well. They'll have different plugins and form plugins. If you log into the admin part of the website and the building part, you should be able to find a form plugin that you can add onto your website, and that will be able to give you the template to be able to work from there. Just something just to bear in mind. It'd be interesting to know why you are going to get the stats, but Google Analytics are going to be changing immensely at the end of this year. So I don't. We're seeing there's lots of different things about cookies and all that type of stuff, and that element might be changing. So when you're thinking about who is visiting your form, who is visiting your website, why do you need to know that information? Is it so do you want to know every single person that comes to actually look at your website, or to come to your website to then access the functionality that you are hosting as part of your service? So yeah, you can use that form to do that part of the sign up process for sure. But as I say, the whole marketing metrics are going to be changing very, very, very soon. So just be interesting to see how you get on with that, and if there's any other sort of bits of information you can get out of that. But if you're using a form, you could then look at the integrations in something like HubSpot potentially. So you can create yourself a CRM or something along those lines. So you collect all the data you need, but you need to know why you're collecting it, and how you're collecting it, and where you're collecting it as well. Hope that's answered your question.
Great, thank you. I can see Shiva nodding and thumbs up, so I think that you have answered her question. Thank you, Maria. Okay, well, thank you so much. I mean, I think if there's no other kind of questions or comments or anything like that, we can maybe look to wrap things up. Did you want to say a few words, Maria, before heading?
No, I mean, for me, that was a really useful session. I would always appreciate feedback as well. If Amy's got any feedback about the stuff that we've covered, if it was useful, if it wasn't useful, or any other parts you thought that I should have explained in a bit more detail, because as I say, there was a lot to cover. But also just say really thank you for inviting me along today. I had a really good time.
Oh, it's our
And
absolute pleasure.
I'm down in Aberdeen fairly soon, I think. So hopefully I'll be on campus to say hi to you all in person if you're about.